So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Yugito. So let's start the series. What Naruto had thought to be a stop for resupplying had turned into annoying hunt in Kumo territory. He had no idea of what legendary Sannin's agenda was, but it wasn't something that he had in mind. He wanted to train and continue to get better. He had promised Sakura that he would get Naruto's friend back, and he had promised that he would become headmaster. He was not going to go back on his word. It was his nindo, his way of the shinobi, but unfortunately, at the moment, he couldn't do anything to attain that goal, especially if they were on some manhunt for a person that only legendary Sannin seemed to be looking for. Of course, he had suggested that they split up, but he had been adamant about not splitting up, especially since he was the only one who knew who they were looking for. When asked why, his answer was because he would cause an unnecessary commotion to look for this person. With the added fact it wouldn't settle well if a foreign shinobi suddenly started to look for someone in their own territory. That left them with their present situation, much to Naruto's chagrin. "How about I train, and you look for this person?" said Naruto. "How about no?" Evidently not pleased by this, he bit out. "What's so important that my training that it has to wait?" The elderly recluse answered, "Because this person has something that you might be interested in." "And that would be?" "Now that is a surprise," he responded, giving his trainee a wink. "It's probably one of your perverted ideas, isn't it?" Naruto complained, having witnessed too many of his antics over the previous 2 years. He also wanted to get more training in because, based on legendary Sannin's schedule, they weren't even close to finished yet, and they only had 6 months left before his scheduled return. Legendary Sannin promised, "Oh, trust me, kid, this is going to be worth your while." But the intended outcome was not achieved. "What makes you think that this person is even here?" replied Naruto. He replied simply, "I have my sources," which obviously did not satisfy the young blonde. Legendary Sannin said abruptly, "You know, I think we're going to need a change of clothes for you." Naruto looked down at his clothing and yelled, "What's wrong with what I'm wearing?" The legendary Sannin said, "A ninja not only needs to look presentable, but be appropriately dressed for duty." But Naruto suspected that he meant to look good in front of women. "As such, it is preferred that one wears dark-colored clothing, rather than that bright hit-me orange you seem to like," Naruto said. Naruto objected, "And what's wrong with orange? I like orange." Legendary Sannin said, "Do you like the idea of wearing a big bullseye on your person all the time?" To which the teenager complained, "Trust me when I say, this'll be part of your training," he said. Naruto snarled, "I don't trust you, Ero Sennin," but was struck in the head instead. Legendary Sannin screamed, glaring daggers at the blonde, "Would you stop calling me that?" Naturally, Naruto could only smirk in amusement, but his smirk was defeated when his stomach began to growl. Legendary Sannin let out a sigh and decided to give in to one of nature's calls, especially since they had been looking for a while with no results, at least not yet. He just hoped that his information hadn't expired because he proposed, "Come on, let's get some food," already sensing what Naruto would choose. "Ramen," Naruto yelled abruptly, gesturing to a ramen shop that was in the boy's direct line of sight. Legendary Sannin laughed, "You and your ramen," and started to follow him when he noticed another person approaching the restaurant. He quickly grabbed the blonde by the scruff of his neck and whispered, "Hold on a few minutes, I just found our quarry." "Who is it, and can it wait?" Naruto grumbled. Legendary Sannin answered his first question by pointing towards someone who was still heading towards the restaurant. Following the indicated directions, his eyes landed on a blonde female Kumo ninja, not much older or younger than him. She sported standard Master Ninja attire, including a black short-sleeved turtleneck, black pants with bandages around her ankles, and blank sandals. Purple sash around her waist with matching colored fingerless gloves, bandages around her forearms with a set of prayer beads wrapped around her left arm, and a Master Ninja breastplate with cloud markings over her left chest. Naruto had almost shrugged it off as a simple cloud Master Ninja and waste of their time when he felt an urge to give her another look. Finding it hard to ignore it, he gave in and looked again. Looking behind the Master Ninja exterior, he found it odd that he began to take in what lay underneath. Porcelain skin, the fairest he had ever seen, and calm, serene. Onyx eyes, the subtle curves of her body could be made out by the military garment of her uniform. But it was there. She had sun-kissed hair that reached down to her waist, was held up in a low ponytail, leaving him wondering what it would look like if it was released. Legendary Sannin abruptly said, "Oh, you like what you see?" jolting Naruto out of his stupor. "Put a sock in it, Ero Sennin," Naruto stammered, fighting to suppress his unexpected flush. Legendary Sannin laughed and made a beeline for the Kumo ninja, saying, Of course. But Naruto caught up fast and had already lowered his blush. "Excuse me, Kumo-san," he said. The ninja was drawn to his call and turned to see who it was. She recognized him right away and bowed before him, saying, "Legendary Sannin-sama, I'm honored, for what do I owe the pleasure?" Legendary Sannin laughed, accustomed to the reverence that accompanied his name. "Recited like a true master ninja," he said. "I would like a moment of your time, and to possibly join us for lunch, my treat," he said. "I dash," Legendary Sannin said. "I insist," while retaining a composed, kind grin and a look that told her he wasn't going to accept no. "Hi," she said, and followed the Sannin as he led them into the restaurant. Of course, being a Sannin had its advantages, as he soon found a booth in a corner without a window and asked to be given a wide berth for a while. Of course, they had complied and moved customers as needed, which was fortunately not many because of the reduced traffic at this hour. They had all placed their orders and were now quietly waiting for their food. During this time, they didn't say anything. Legendary Sannin just had a laid-back expression, and he watched the two grow accustomed to sitting next to a foreign ninja and wondered what in the world he wanted with them. "First, I suppose introductions are in order. This is my apprentice, Uzumaki Naruto. This is Kumo Master Ninja ni Yugito. And don't ask how I know," he said, shrugging his shoulders, but trying to at least start a conversation. Naruto said, Hi. But he did so awkwardly because he wasn't sure how to interpret the circumstance. "Hi," Yugito said cautiously, attempting to analyze the current circumstance, but since it was Legendary Sannin, she had a suspicion that by the time she understood what was going on, Legendary Sannin's plan would have already been realized. "I'm Ero Sennin dash." "Especially in front of this fine master ninja?" the Legendary Sannin hissed angrily. "Do you mind?" "We passed many others that we could have spoken to," said Naruto, disregarding Legendary Sannin's remark and the slight flush that appeared on the Master Ninja's face that Legendary Sannin noticed. "Why do you want to speak with this Master Ninja?" Naruto inquired. "I have my reasons," Legendary Sannin replied, glancing at the waitress who was bringing their orders. After confirming that they were alone and that they had prepared enough ramen to satisfy him for a while, he continued. "Yugito-san, what do you know of Jinchuriki?" The outcome was immediate, and he was currently relieved that Yugito was seated inside, particularly given the worried expression on her face, while Naruto was observing him with interest. Yugito quickly responded, "I don't know what you're talking about," in an attempt to gather her thoughts and leave the situation as soon as possible. "I know you carry one, much like this person next to you," Legendary Sannin grumbled, sipping his sake. "Don't play with me," he said. When Yugito realized she had just made a mistake, she abruptly cursed at herself after responding. "I'm not what?" "Wait, are you saying that dash?" Naruto asked, staring back and forth between Yugito and Legendary Sannin. Legendary Sannin introduced Yugito to Naruto by saying, "Yugito-san, meet the jailer of the Kyubi no Yoko," and vice versa. "Naruto, meet the jailer of the Nibi no Bakeniko." Choosing to take it all in, he ate his ramen while he watched the two of them process the information. "I don't know what you're doing, Legendary Sannin-sama, but I'm not playing your games," said Yugito. "After all, I'm sure you both have many things to share about each other," Legendary Sannin continued, putting more food in his mouth nonchalantly. "No games, just brining two kinsmen, as it were, together," he said. She looked at the boy next to him and realized that he had been staring at her for a long time. She didn't know how long, but when she did, she realized that he had some of the saddest eyes she had ever seen. She could see the scars of his past and the sadness that surrounded him as a child. It seemed like he had gone through a lot growing up and was trying to change. The look in his eyes almost seemed to indicate that he had occasionally nearly lost his mind due to the pain and suffering he had to endure. She had no idea what he had gone through, but it was obvious that he had a terrible childhood. Naruto abruptly said, "You're one too, huh?" yanking Yugito out of her reverie. "Seems that way," Yugito groaned, realizing that there was no reason to conceal it any longer, particularly since the Sannin was standing in front of them and addressing them directly. "But I do not understand, Legendary Sannin-sama. What was the point of telling us of our Jinchuriki status?" Yugito said. Legendary Sannin said, dismissively waving it off. "There are a number of reasons," he said. "First, as I mentioned, I wanted you two to meet because of your similar status. Secondly," he said, reaching into his jacket and taking out a small pamphlet, "there is a festival tomorrow night, which both of you will be in attendance at." "What? Ero Sennin, what are you dash?" "Legendary Sannin-sama, but I have other dash." Legendary Sannin said, "I didn't say I want you to be in attendance, I said you will be in attendance," as he was eating his meal, but the message was clear. "With that little issue dealt with, I suggest you find some appropriate clothing, well, in Naruto's case, a much more appropriate outfit than you've got," they said, with little choice in the matter. Naruto objected. "Like I said, what's wrong with my clothes?" Legendary Sannin said, "Quite simply, I refuse to continue training someone who wants to dress like that," before finishing the bowl and washing it down with a final bowl of sake. Although he did not approve of Naruto's preferred style, he wasn't going to tell him that he would still train him. Yugito raised an eyebrow in amazement that one of the legendary Sannin had taken on an apprentice and inquired, "He's your apprentice?" Legendary Sannin said, "You got that right," getting to his feet. "Enjoy your meal, I've already got the bill covered." He waved before approaching the register, paying for their meal, and leaving the two of them alone. You're kidding me," said Naruto. "What does he expect us to do?" Although she was initially surprised that Legendary Sannin wanted the two of them to associate, Yugito calmly said, "I suppose enjoy the food, and get to know each other," as she helped herself to a mouthful of ramen. She wasn't one to disobey one of the legendary Sannin, but she wasn't sure about Naruto because he had openly argued against legendary Sannin from the moment she met the two of them. Naruto complained, "Damn that Ero Sennin," as he continued to eat his ramen. Yugito raised an eyebrow, shocked that Naruto was publicly referring to his sensei as a pervert. "How is he a pervert?" The older master ninja blushed when Naruto asked, "You know that Ika Ika series that's been going around?" He just nodded, unsure of whether he was shocked by what it might mean or embarrassed that she had read it. "Well, he's the author of that damn book," he said simply. "Eh?" Naruto sighed and carried on eating. "Yup." Yugito moaned and buried her face in the palm of her left hand. What oh my," she said. "What's worse is that he peeks at women's bathhouses to research for his latest books," he said, obviously not amused by his sensei's behavior. I really didn't need to know that, Yugito said, blushing at the thought that she might have been one of the numerous ladies he has been studying. They were both Jinchuriki and had a tailed beast in their bellies, so at least they had someone to confide in, even if it was only for a short time before they parted ways. Eventually, silence fell over them as they resumed eating. Of course, now that they were sitting next to someone they could easily consider a relative of sorts, they could at least understand each other. At the very least, they could at least understand each other. The reason why legendary Sannin would actually want to meet was beyond them at the moment, but at least they had someone to whom they could at least. One could almost say that it was a healthy way of letting their emotions out for once, without the mask. So, a cat, Naruto remarked as he drained the remaining stew. Yugito nodded and pushed her bowl aside. Yeah, she said. And you have a fox. Naruto mumbled, looking down at his stomach. An annoying one at that. Adding, damn thing doesn't like me one bit. With her elbows resting on the table, Yugito remarked. I can't say the same thing with mine. Adding, she's been there for me since I was little. Been there for you? I've known about her since I was 4 or 5, she said. We have a working respect for each other. She offers me chakra, and I use that chakra to keep us both alive. The question made her frown. What about the villagers? He asked, curious about how she had grown up. Didn't they hate you? Unfortunately, that statement worried her because she had grown up being treated like a normal child. Based on the expression in his eyes, she genuinely wondered what in the world he had gone through to have that kind of look. The thought actually made her shudder a little because she had never seen someone with that kind of look before. She replied, looking down at her. Not exactly. I grew up like any other child, even though my parents died when I was young. The village always looked after me, and I spent a few years in an orphanage before being adopted. I got help whenever I needed it, and I was respected for who I was. I never had a difficult life. Of course, many of the villagers worship me because I am the Nibi's carrier, some kind of messiah, sent down from heaven to be the demon's jailer. I cannot change the fact that I am the Nibi's jailer, that I am the bearer of a monster in the eyes of the village, but who I am is different, Yugito said calmly as he turned to face the blonde. Who are you? What we are never changes, Yugito said, nodding in answer to Naruto's. But who we are never stops. I maybe cannot change the fact I'm a Jinchuriki, but I can change who I am. I can always be known as a jailer, but I can always have people also remember me for who I am, like a caring mother, a good friend, a beautiful woman with a sour personality. All these, I can change. I control who I am. I control how people, who look past what I am, think of me. That is what I can change. I can change myself to leave a different impression. Yugito-san. How about you? With a level gaze, she said. What do you wish to alter about yourself? Who would you like to be? Naruto laughed and thumbed at his hide on his forehead, saying, That's an easy one. I plan to become headmaster, he said. And why is that? So that people can recognize me, and I can be able to protect everyone and everything that's precious to me, Naruto firmly stated. I never go back on my word, that's my way of the shinobi. According to Yugito. Much like a fox. What? Foxes, according to lore, are beings who always keep their promises, Yugito said. It seems to suit you. You believe? With a humiliating laugh, Naruto rubbed the back of his head. How did your life go? I see there are similarities, but on different extremes, Yugito asked, now a little interested in the blonde beside her. You could say that, he acknowledged. Since he probably wouldn't be able to accomplish much in the way of training right now, he thought he might as well kill time. He began by telling Yugito about his life, starting when he was a young child. She listened carefully as he described how he grew up in terror and pain, not knowing or understanding why he was being attacked and beaten up. It wasn't something he couldn't control, but he never understood why. As he grew older, he became increasingly adept at hiding from the villagers and shinobi who wanted nothing more than to kill him or beat him up. Eventually, it got to the point where he developed his stealth abilities and used them to his new method of drawing attention, pulling practical jokes on the village. The main highlight, at least in Yugito's mind, was when he defaced the headmaster monument by painting on all of the faces of the villagers. Her amusement was only increased by the fact that he had escaped from multiple master ninjas and chunin before being apprehended by his academy sensei, who simply had a knack for finding the boy wherever he was. Of course, at this point, he had wanted to become headmaster so that the people of his village would recognize him as a person and not some sort of pariah. But as time passed, his purpose remained the same, but the motivation behind them changed and evolved. Of course, that only confirmed her earlier statement that who and what one was were two entirely different things. That's quite the story," Yugito said, surprised to hear him regale about a past he was unhappy with. It was a miracle that he was sitting next to her today, still in good mental health, rather than some crazed madman who had lost it under the weight of the village's rage and hatred. Although she could understand what it was like to be looked down upon because of uncontrollable circumstances, the villagers' feelings toward Naruto were completely different from their feelings toward her. If she had died or something had happened to her, the village would have been enraged because the Raikage would have taken immediate action to protect her. She put a hand on his shoulder and regretfully muttered, I don't know what to say." "I'm used to it," he said with a sigh. "Besides, I've been changing people. Most of the villagers just don't like me instead of hate me. But there are people out there who like me or recognize me, so I have to be doing something right." "I suppose so," she said wryly, still in awe of Naruto's character. She could say that he was quite the character, and the fact that he was still normal was a testament to that strength. He was also loyal to his village, which showed how much he hoped that his village would one day recognize him for who he really was. When she saw the time, she looked down at a watch she kept under her glove and raised an eyebrow. "We've been here for over an hour," she said. Naruto said, "Didn't feel like it," as he rose from his chair. "Well, it was nice meeting you. I guess I'll see you tomorrow night," she said, agreeing and leaving her seat. "I guess," he said with a sigh before his face became bitter. "Now I have to get new clothes," he said. "I do have to agree with legendary Sanin-sama though." "Not you as well?" he cried bitterly. With an almost contrite expression on her face, she said, "I'm inclined to agree with legendary Sanin-sama on this," adding, "I could probably see you a mile away with that get-up." "Then assist me," Naruto complained. "I'm not sure what to wear while still looking orange." "If you like," Yugito said. "I was supposed to leave tomorrow, but I can't exactly refuse a Sanin's request." "All right, let's go." Walking out the door with Yugito in tow, Naruto said, Yugito-san." "Indeed, Uzumaki-san?" "Well, where can I find clothes that fit me?" His inquiry caused a look of profound skepticism to appear on the Kumonin's face. She shook her head angrily before guiding him to a few clothes shops she was familiar with. Legendary Sanin grinned from a distance, both amused and satisfied, not realizing that he had been listening in. "Kid, you'll thank me for this later," he said quietly. "So, did you have fun?" Legendary Sanin said. "Oh, and I see you took my advice and got new clothes." As he watched Naruto enter their apartment. Though he didn't explicitly say it, he felt a wave of nostalgia as he took in Naruto's fashion sense. He was wearing a black turtleneck and black pants with bandage bindings around his ankles, with stripes of dark red-orange running down the sides of his sleeves, shirt, and pants. A pair of armlets completed the ensemble. Unbeknownst to him, Naruto had actually dressed in a manner reminiscent of the Uzumaki clan, except that it was red rather than orange. Naruto complained. Yugito-san helped, and threw the bag containing his original clothing onto his bed. Are we already on a first-name basis? The renowned Sanin teased, raising his eyebrows suggestively. Oh, cut it out, Ero-senin, moaned Naruto. Can't you be so perverted for even 5 minutes? Legendary Sanin started posing and said, But I told you, I'm a super dash. Naruto said, Yeah, I know, a super pervert, and shut the bathroom door. Infuriated that Naruto had interrupted him when he was posing, Legendary Sanin sighed. Well then, at least stage 1 is completed. All right, let's get started, Legendary Sanin proposed, grinning with laughter at his apprentice, who was now wearing his new outfit, which was undoubtedly more suitable for someone in his profession. Of course, there was also the fact that he looked like a certain someone, but he wasn't going to go say that just yet. Naruto complained, rearranging his personal belongings to ensure they were securely fastened. Yeah, let's get this over with, he said. What's that attitude about now? The legendary Sanin remarked, laughing. You look good as a man and as a ninja. Can't we simply start? In an effort to wrap up the evening as quickly as possible, Naruto asked of Legendary Sanin. Legendary Sanin joyfully declared. Okay, let's go, as he escorted Naruto out of their hotel. And you shouldn't be so grumpy, we did spend the day training, he said. If you call a morning of taijutsu sparring and an afternoon of studying training, Naruto complained bitterly. Don't be silly, said the legendary Sanin dismissively. Knowledge is power. You can have all the best techniques in the world, but if you don't have the strategic knowledge how to deal with your enemies, then all you will do is just get yourself killed. And don't forget, Kages aren't just strong, they're also highly intelligent and educated people. Knowing exactly what was expected of him when he became headmaster, Naruto said in the same dejected tone. Yeah, diplomatic abilities and all, I get that. The Sanin gave Naruto a thumbs up and said, Keep that in mind, and you'll definitely succeed. The remainder of the walk down to the designated meeting place was silent, leaving the two of them to ponder. Being the simple-minded boy that he was, Naruto was primarily concerned with the fact that he was wasting valuable training time instead of continuing to develop himself so that he could eventually succeed 5th headmaster as headmaster. However, he was wasting his time at a festival with a girl, a Kumo girl who was a ninja, at Legendary Sanin's insistence. Of course, he had little say in the matter, as they were both compelled to accompany him on this excursion. Naturally, this annoyed him greatly, but regrettably, either of them could do much about it. Since either could deter the Sanin, he simply hoped that there were ramen stands nearby so that he could concentrate on that for the evening. Legendary Sanin, on the other hand, had a secretive grin plastered across his face. Although the initial aspects of his plan were hastily slapped together, he could already see it blossoming in the coming future. Of course, he had to thank his informants for this particular piece of information. His dealings with Akatsuki were anything but enjoyable, although they had yet to make a move on Naruto. They had started to become a lot more active, beginning to actively gather all the other tailed beasts. For what purpose he had yet to determine, but at present, phase 1 of the plan was in motion, although at the moment, he had a feeling that he was going to get some sort of pleasant byproduct out of all this, especially since Yugito was only 16, he struggled to keep in that lecherous giggle, but controlled it he did. The last thing he needed right now was Naruto's usual tirade about his perversions. Not that he was ashamed of it, but if things went well, he could throw a wrench in Akatsuki's plans, a few more if everything fell into place. Legendary Sanin murmured, searching the area for the blonde Kumo master ninja. Now let's see where's that Yugito. Adding, Be on the lookout, kid, we have no idea how she's going to be dressed. According to Naruto, How about her normal clothing? Legendary Sanin waved dismissively. Don't be silly. Saying, there's no chance that dash. Murda reiterated. No, I mean she is wearing her normal clothes. Taking Legendary Sanin by the shoulder and turning him to face Yugito, who was dressed in her typical Kumo garb. What? The great Legendary Sanin gasped, scandalized at the fact that Yugito had actually showed up in her Master Ninja attire. This won't do at all. This isn't going to work. Women are expected to wear in yutakas or kimonos. This will not work. He then seized the blondes almost as quickly as he had responded, ran directly to the closest clothes store that carried yutakas, and went up to the counter. I demand that you find this young lady a yutaka fit for a noblewoman, he said. Well, the storekeeper responded, somewhat taken aback by Legendary Sanin's unexpected tirade. Well, Legendary Sanin shot the storekeeper a level look in return. The storekeeper said, right away, and began searching the store for the suitable yutaka. Legendary Sanin-sama, there's no need to dash. I'm getting you a yutaka unless you already have one, Legendary Sanin said, giving Yugito another one of his leveled looks that said he would not be influenced. Naturally, this caused the two blondes who were with him to sign a resignation as they watched the Sannin choose Yugito's evening attire. In Nerda's case, he felt very uneasy. Legendary Sanin joyfully said, there, that should do. To Nerda's astonishment, his sensei had actually done a good job of dressing Yugito. She had been wearing her Kumo gear, which was now sealed into a scroll thanks to Legendary Sanin. She was wearing a lavender yutaka with golden cloud embroidery instead of her original outfit, and a yellow-orange obi with yellow-green cloud patterns around her lithe waist. Although he had pursued Yugito to take off her hittite, she had flatly refused to put her hair up, so he made accommodations by substituting the cloth holding her ponytail with a simple lavender ribbon that hung down her back. Legendary Sanin said, I think I've outdone myself, with a big smile on his face as he watched Nerda's activity out of the corner of his eye. If he was able to convince Nerdu to stare at a female like that, he had undoubtedly outdone himself. Nerdu had to blink several times before he could comprehend what he was seeing, but she was much more attractive than Sakura. He realized that even the girl at the waterfall couldn't match her, and the yutaka accentuated her body's curves. He could see the womanly curves of her still-growing body, and the fact that she was now a teenage girl instead of the master ninja he had met yesterday made her appear to be glowing. Even the way she stood exuded a regal aura, that arrogant pride that seemed to be seen in cats of different ancestry, but it was that specific look in her eyes that captured his attention. Despite her confidence, the superiority that came with her rank, and the commanding presence she carried in her eyes, he could see that underneath it all was a young girl who wanted to live a normal life, to grow up liked and respected, to have avoided the hardships in her life, to live a different life, even if that meant that she wasn't a shinobi. She was staring back at herself in disbelief, almost as if she couldn't believe that she was actually seeing herself dressed like this, as if this were just a passing dream, one that she wanted to savor for as long as possible before it slipped through her fingers back into the infinity where it would stay, forever out of her grasp. He wondered, when did I start thinking like that? As he suddenly became aware that these thoughts were entering his head. It seemed as though a dormant aspect of him was beginning to come to life. You really take after your mother, kid, said Legendary Sanin, grinning in his head because he had seen the expression on someone else before. I remember seeing that expression when she saw your father in his wedding clothes. How do I appear? Yugito inquired, looking to Nerdu and Legendary Sanin for their thoughts. Excellent. Legendary Sanin's first response was to flash her a big smile and give her the thumbs up. Nerdu, on the other hand, was left stunned. Naturally, Legendary Sanin wasn't overly shocked, so he decided to lend him a hand by placing a heavy hand on his shoulder and saying, I think you've blown him away if he's not talking. Wouldn't you agree, Nerdu? Yeah, after he recovered from his shock, he said. You look fantastic. Legendary Sanin said. Well then, since that's been dealt with, have fun. While waving and grinning his signature smile. Nuda began to scream. Wait, I know that look, wait dash. But then he saw his sensei vanish in a whirlpool of leaves. A second, damn that arrow Senin, he murmured, letting out a deep sigh before turning to face Yugito and saying, I guess it's just you and me. Yugito said, I guess so, after taking a few deep breaths to gather herself. Should we go? Nuda said, Yes, sure, and abruptly raised his arm, causing the blonde woman to seem astonished. She remarked, Quite the gentleman, and grasped Nuda's extended arm. Arrow Senin did teach me a few things, Nuda said, hesitantly touching the back of his head as he escorted her out of the store. Oh? Nuda laughed and said, Yeah, surprisingly, they weren't his usual perverted lessons. What precisely did he teach you, then? Yugito inquired. He said sheepishly, Well, how to escort a lady, how I should act, how to treat a lady, a lot of boring stuff. Yugito said, Well, I'm glad he taught you how, with a faint smile. You believe so? If I didn't think someone was at least a little gentlemanly, do you think I would have objected to walking arm in arm with them? Yugito answered, arching a kind eyebrow. I suppose, laughed Nuda. After a moment of hesitation, Yugito said, So, before choosing to ask, Nuda-san, if you don't mind, may I inquire what your age is? And you? I turn 16 next month, he replied. She responded, I just turned 16, as they both realized they were the same age. Whoa! You're a master ninja already, Nuda remarked that he was shocked to see a young master ninja with such level. It's nothing, she replied, dismissing the compliment with nonchalance. I have my reasons for wanting to rank up, she said. You wish to alter your identity, don't you? Recalling Yugito's remarks regarding her ideology from yesterday, Nuda inquired. That's part of it, she responded, peering over her shoulder at a series of different stands. But, it's more like I want to be able to step out of the shadow that the Nibi casts over me. It is a big shadow though, considering that she's one of the most powerful beings that our country possesses. But instead of hearing how I'm some sort of deity, I want to be able to hear people talking about Yugito, one of the best ninjas of Kumogakure, or maybe hear some sort of title that others have. Given me, I want to be able to talk beside what I am, not be overshadowed by it. Being a master ninja helps, but I still need to keep working at it before I can truly step out of this shadow. As he and Yugito traveled, Nuda sighed and kept his eyes forward, saying, I still have a long way to go, I'm still a genin. No way, Yugito said, taken aback by this specific revelation from Nuda. Given that you are legendary Sanin-sama's apprentice, I thought you were at least Chunin. I haven't been home for 2 years, and I've missed a lot of exams, but that doesn't matter. Even if I'm still a genin, I'll definitely become headmaster. Well, apparently I didn't impress them enough during the Chunin exams. Nuda sighed, recalling that only Shikamaru was promoted to Chunin at the time. And it's a pledge. You're pretty ambitious, Yugito said, smiling with wonder and respect at his perseverance. And persistent, if you've been pursuing this dream for over 10 years. No matter how long it takes, I'll become headmaster, he said with assurance. The best one that ever existed, and I don't go back on my word. I look forward to that day when I see you wearing that mantle of leadership, Nuda-san, Yugito replied with confidence. Her gaze strayed around the stalls for a while before stopping at a specific gaming stall with a very large blue plush cat as the prize. Say, how do you feel like winning a plush for me? Well? Come on, she said with a laugh, and dragged Nuda over to the stand. The game was a straightforward ring toss. "Win me that thing," she said, pointing to the big cat. After taking the money from Naruto and giving him 3 rings, the attendant said, "That'll be 100 Rio. The game is simple: toss the rings at the prize you want, and make sure that ring lands on the corresponding post," the attendant said. Naruto muttered, "Well then," lined up his shot, and threw the ring with the ninja's precision, only to watch it bounce off the post. He raised an eyebrow and scowled slightly, then threw his second ring and watched it bounce once more, even though he knew he had a perfect shot. He growled slightly in annoyance, dropped another 100 Rio for 3 more rings, and then took his shirt shot and watched it bounce once more. "Well?" Yugito couldn't help but sigh. The first shot had already informed her that the ring was slightly too small for the block post. The entire situation had been rigged. The wise move had been to covertly enlarge the ring before throwing it, ideally the third shot to give him some time to do so. As she leaned in to give him this advice, she noticed that his offhand was beginning to enlarge a ring as he took aim with his 4th ring. Maybe he wasn't as stupid as he seemed, maybe he was just a little slower than most, or he wanted to fool everyone around him. Nevertheless, it didn't matter to her because she was now assured of getting her desired plush toy. He muttered, "I'm going to get this," and tossed again, only to have his 5th attempt fail as well. Signing in frustration, he took cautious aim and tossed his final ring, watching with apprehension as it caught the post and looped around it multiple times before sliding down into place. "Yada," he yelled. "Hand that cat over." Even though he was well aware that he had cheated. Yugito watched with a laugh from behind as the attendant gave him the big plush toy in shock and disbelief. Of course, he probably had not realized he was a ninja, which she instantly threw out of her head, especially since he was still wearing his hittite. The likely explanation was that he looked like a stupid fool, and if that were the case, she had to give Naruto credit for misleading those who watched him play the game. Naruto said, "Here you go, 1 cat plush," and gave the cuddly to blonde Kunoichi. She responded, "Arigato, Naruto-san," and took the provided plush. Legendary Sanin abruptly said, "I see that you got your lovely date quite the cute gift," frightening the 2 of them from behind. "Where in heck are you from?" Naruto yelled, gazing accusingly at his sensei. The Sannin sagely said, "A good ninja never reveals his tricks," much to the younger blonde's dismay. "What are you looking for? And by date, what do you mean?" Naruto complained while glaring sharply at Legendary Sanin. While pulling out a scroll and writing a seal to seal Yugito's plush within, he casually said, "Just dropping by, seeing how you 2 are doing," before handing it to her. "And you don't call spending the evening with a pretty young girl in this here festival a date?" "I call it being forced to hang out with each other because you brought us here and left us behind," Naruto replied, glaring at Legendary Sanin. The 2 looked over to where the elderly recluse gestured to see the familiar glow of a massive bonfire, then Naruto pointed off somewhere and stated, "Well, there is dance that's taking place by the bonfire over there," as if he had never spoken. "And why did you dash?" Naruto started to inquire, only to discover that he was speaking to air once more, particularly since his sensei was not present. Again. "Don't you think that Legendary Sanin-sama enjoys doing this?" Yugito commented, moving to place the scroll into her yutaka when Naruto gently relieved her of the object, and pocketed it into one of his pouches. "You didn't have." Although he wasn't sure why, Naruto muttered, blushing slightly, "I wanted to. Especially since he had actually chosen to follow another lesson from Legendary Sanin, which was to offer to carry things for the lady. In this case, just carry it for her without offering. "Do you want to check it out?" he blurted out, again unsure of what he was doing, but he realized that, despite his embarrassment, he wasn't particularly opposed to the prospect of dancing with Yugito. "Why not?" Yugito said, taking his arm in hers as they began to descend toward the flames. They walked in comparatively quiet silence until the thought. What was it like growing up? Did you live in constant fear? Did you have to run all the time? Have to conceal all the time? Nerda thought about the question for a few minutes. It wasn't a topic he particularly enjoyed discussing, and remembering it hurt him, especially with all the pain that had been attached to it. However, talking about it with someone who could at least somewhat relate made him feel at least a little more at ease with the idea of talking about it. He hoped that even though she wouldn't understand everything, she would at least be able to see some of his pains. I was always scared, he ultimately replied. I never knew why they hated me until I graduated. I always had to hide, had to run at night especially. The kids never wanted to play with me. Their parents somehow affected the kids, and they were afraid of me or hated me. But I don't think any of them knew why. They probably never told their kids about what was inside of me. But they never tried to be my friend. Some tried to bully me. I'm not sure how I survived it. But I guess after I started to play pranks on everyone, and began proclaiming that I was going to be headmaster, it helped me a little. I started to wear a smile everywhere, but it always hurt. Everyone never knew how much I hurt. It was hard. It's still hard. Naruto-san. Considering how often Niji preached about fate, he wryly said, I guess that's the fate of the people like us. I can't change what I am, so I want to change who I am. That's why I want to become headmaster. I want to see people for me, not for what I am, or what I carry, and protect the village and those precious to me, he said. As she tightened her hold on his arm, she groaned. That's quite harsh. He sighed and said, The memories will always remain with me, but they will also make me stronger since I know that I have moved over it. What about you, Yugito-san? What was your life like? It's like I said yesterday. Yugito sighed, gazing off into the distance with a dejected expression. I was liked and respected, but I was always accused of being the Nibi's jailer. I was trapped under that large shadow, and my identity was hidden in the darkness. I never had to steal to survive, and I always had food on my table. I worked hard to get to where I am now, but even then, I still have people who worship me or treat me with more respect than I'd like. I don't remember when I first realized that I wanted to change who I am, Yugito said. We can't change the fact we're containers of a tailed beast, but we can change how people look at us. That's what I want to do in my own way. You want to become headmaster and gain the respect of everyone in your village, but I can be happy if there were people who could see ni Yugito, not the demon container, just ni Yugito. Yugito-san. It's almost as if they see us as something other than human. Yugito sighed. So I can understand the need to be recognized by others. We had attention that we didn't want instead of needed, Yugito said. It's safe to assume that you grew up without your parents? Nerda lamented. I never knew them. As he looked off into space, unwilling to show her the pain in his eyes at the realization that, up until he met Irika, he had no biological parents. I think that's part of the fate that's handed down to us to grow up never knowing our true family probably died protecting us or giving birth to us. All I know was that my father died on missions before I was ever born, and my mother died giving birth to me, giving me my name with her last breath. You're lucky, moaned Nerda. You say that, but why? I don't even know what happened to them. They just disappeared, like they never existed. No one knows who they were. There's no record of Uzumaki in the records that I can access. I'm alone, literally. Both of them eventually stopped as they gazed at the enormous bonfire. I have friends, I have people I can call Nai-san or Nei-chan, but no one to call Ota-san or Oka-san, not even a grave that I can visit to tell them how I'm doing. You at least know what happened to them. Even if you never met them, I can't say the same. Nerdu-san. But I'd like to think that somewhere out there, they're happy, they're proud of what I've become, he said, as he gazed at the night stars. I think they're watching me, although unable to do anything. I'd like to think that they're helping me somehow, but I want to know who they are. Maybe when I die someday I can finally meet them, and show them what I became. Tell them my stories and hear them tell me stories. Keep thinking that, Yugito replied. Take it in, but keep all the good, and let the bad flow away. I think your parents want you to be happy. Any real parent, all they want is to watch their children grow up happy. Keep your head up, work hard, and achieve your dreams, and I will do the same. He said, and turned to face the fire. He felt, in a strange way, that his parents were there, staring back at him, telling him to keep going, to keep walking the same path he had, and to become a powerful man. At the same time, he saw his mother's shadow urging him to ask her. For some reason, he thought it was only natural for a mother to do this, so he complied. Say, would you like to dance? He asked abruptly. Yugito said, Sure, I'd like that, and let herself be escorted to the area where the other dancers were. Standing on the edge of the dance floor, the two of them took a moment to observe what the others were doing and decided to just imitate what they saw. After taking a few deep breaths to calm down, Nuda finally put his hands on Yugito's waist, and she put her hands on his shoulders. They listened to the steady drum beats for a while, learning the song's rhythm and gradually blending in with the music. Their feet moved on their own, stepping and gliding as one entity as they danced. As they danced, they couldn't help but get caught up in each other's whirlpool. They truly saw a piece of themselves in each other. They had both endured and grown from the pain of their pasts. They didn't allow the past to control them. Instead, they controlled how it affected them. They were resolute about the paths they took, despite the fact that they were different. However, they also felt that their paths could somehow fit together. It was almost as perfect as they realized how well they appeared to physically fit together. Her hands seemed to fit, to rest comfortably on his shoulders, while his hands easily molded into the curves of her waist, as if they were cut from the same stone, forming perfect halves of the other. According to Yugito, you dance quite well. My first time, revealed Nuda hesitantly. Yugito blushed a little as she acknowledged that it was also her first time dancing. Quite well, for a beginner, although I will admit that this is also my first time, she added. They nevertheless kept dancing in silence, savoring the moment as long as they could because they would both be returning to the shinobi world tomorrow, where they would most likely be adversaries the next time they saw each other. As he tried to get a few hours of sleep that night before he and legendary Sanin had to leave, Nuda felt as though a piece of himself was missing. In reality, he was disappointed when he and Yugito had to part ways, and he didn't know why. Now, here they were at the gates of a small village in Lightning Country as they said their goodbyes and went their separate ways. Legendary Sanin sighed and held out his hand to the cat Jinchuriki, saying, Well, it's best that we be heading on our way. It's been a pleasure, Ni-san, he said. Yugito said, That it has, legendary Sanin-sama, and he shook hands. To Nuda's chagrin, legendary Sanin replied, I'll give you two a minute, and vanished in a cloud of smoke, leaving the two blondes alone. I guess I'll see you around, he said, turning back to Yugito after realizing there was nothing he could do about it. She sighed and extended her hand to Nuda, saying, I hope the next time we meet, it won't be as enemies. It won't be, we'll be friends, Nuda said with a sardonic laugh before taking her hand in his and shaking it firmly. I certainly hope you're right, Yugito sighed. Despite their friendship, they both knew that Kumo and Konoha were not on good terms with one another. If their paths and missions crossed, they would undoubtedly become enemies, and they could say with certainty that if they had to choose between their village and each other, they would choose their village. They only hoped that the other would understand each other if one of them had to die. Good luck on your goals, Nuda-kun, Yugito said. Have I not told you? I don't break my word. I will become headmaster, that is a promise. I'll be the best there is, he said with a laugh and a thumbs up. Yugito smiled lightly at him and added, I look forward to that day. A cozy silence descended on the two as they exchanged one final glance. Still wearing the same black outfit he had always worn, Yugito couldn't help but think that he looked handsome and that he was much more mature for his age than he had been in his original orange jumpsuit, which suited the look in his eyes. It was similar to hers, but it had its own spark, just as her own eyes had its own charm and beauty. Naruto, on the other hand, just looked at Yugito, and even though he didn't know her well, he could at least comprehend her. They both followed similar paths, but they worked toward their own objectives, and for some reason, he felt that eventually their paths would cross and become one, leading the two of them to some ultimate goal, reserved for Jinchuriki. Naruto waved her off and remarked, "I guess I'll see you around, Yugito-san," before turning to meet legendary Sannin. For a while, Yugito watched the two walk away. "Until we meet again," she said to no one in particular before running off in the direction of her own destiny. The following. Legendary Sannin was amused by Naruto's gloomy demeanor, and it was obvious that he had already grown attached to his fellow Jinchuriki, even if it was just because he understood Yugito's position as a Jinchuriki, and they were hated for things they couldn't control. He didn't understand how people could be so cruel, but he had to explain that humans didn't understand a lot of things, and that they usually feared what they didn't understand. It had been so long since a tail beast had been mentioned that their existence was either forgotten or thought to be a legend. "What's wrong? Are you unable to speak?" Legendary Sannin said, pointing out that Naruto was not behaving like his typically vivacious self. "Well, it's nothing," he deadpanned, almost as if he hadn't heard him, which caused the Toad Hermit to look at him curiously. He was now wondering if Naruto truly felt sorry for Yugito if he was reacting in this way. Based on his memory, he had never behaved in this way when he had left Konoha, even though he had left behind the girl he liked and people he cared about. This got his mind racing for a short while before he came to the humorous conclusion that meeting Yugito had left a deeper impression on Naruto that not even the Konoha residents could match. "Oh? So why do you have that cat on your head?" he asked, laughing. "Well, because she's cute," he said once more. He kept his gaze fixed on the front as he continued to move forward without direction. With another 6 months before they had to return, legendary Sannin figured he'd be able to see the initial stages of the plan eventually come together and bear fruit. "Damn, they must have really gotten close last night if he's like this," he said, now wondering in amusement what was waiting for Naruto at their next destination. The fact that he used the pronoun she when referring to the cat only made him smile more because Naruto had just hinted at Yugito, given what her tenant was. As they quietly walked, Naruto's mind continued to drift back towards the blonde they had left behind. He wasn't sure why, but he couldn't stop thinking about her. What stood out the most in his mind's eye were her eyes. They were happy. They held certain warmth that he knew was lacking in his eyes. She grew up knowing love, kindness, and happiness. He never got to experience any of that. But despite the opposite looks in their eyes, and as strange as it seemed, he found comfort knowing that there were those like him who could grow up happy and treated normally. Perhaps he was just unfortunate that the demon sealed inside him was the attacker of the village. Thinking more about the differences in their lives, Gaara's eyes slowly faded into view. He and Gaara shared similar eyes, which were opposite to Yugito's. They wallowed in pain and suffering while Yugito bathed in happiness and care. It was clear who lived the better life. And yet it was also due to where they grew up and how they grew, and although their lives differed, they all shared one commonality. They were all carriers of a tailed beast. And as he continued to reflect on his current line of thought, Yugito's face gradually took over his thoughts as they gradually shifted to her. She permeated his thoughts in a curious way as he tried to figure out how he felt about her. He didn't really understand, but there was something about the way she seemed to have been made specifically to fit into his body and his to hers. His hands just rested so comfortably around her waist, which also made him wonder if he had put his arms around her entire body, and it felt right to have her hands on his shoulders. Or perhaps even around his neck if she had chosen to do so. As he continued to think about it, various aspects of her started to creep up on his mind: her scent, her sunlight hair, her body, her eyes, her body, her body, her body, her eyes, her body, her body, her body, her scent, her body, her eyes, her body, 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 her eyes, her body, her body. Everything about her, like an unstoppable wave. Naruto sighed, gazing carefully ahead. Just what is she to me? Legendary Sannin abruptly said. A fellow Jinchuriki who seems to have captured your attention. What? It's clear to me that she's captured your attention, the Sannin replied with a sage nod. You find that you can't stop thinking about her, and various aspects of her begin to start forming in your mind, such as her smell, her skin, her eyes, maybe even her smile. You begin to start dissecting these thoughts to her, which eventually begin to bring up the topic of her personality. Among other things, simply put, you stand on the border of a strong crush or obsession, or falling in love with the girl. Well, Naruto yelled while scandalously glancing at his sensei. Nothing wrong with that, said Legendary Sannin dismissively. It's normal for a boy your age to start noticing girls. The difference is that you are starting to seriously concern yourself with whether or not she's the one. You find you're evaluating whether or not what you feel towards her is the sign of love, or a simple infatuation because of some sort of aspect of her, be it her eyes, her body, or otherwise, that you find attractive. Superficial reasons in that case. You seem to know a lot about this. What are you anticipating? I am the author of the Ika series, so I must understand these aspects of love if I'm going to write such stories. The Legendary Sannin said, laughing as his trainees gazed at him. Ah, I see, said Naruto, twitching slightly at the realization that Legendary Sannin had provided a thorough response to that specific query. But right now you're confused and unsure of what you're feeling, he said. Just give it some time. After all, you probably won't see Yugito-san for a while. I suppose, Naruto muttered, choosing to end the discussion for the time being. So, where do we go from here? Waterfall Country, was his response. What's there? Some of the best raging waters to train your chakra control, and another person we need to meet, he responded. Another one like Yugito-san and me? Naruto inquired, anticipating what would happen next. More drawn to the Jinchuriki than to your Naruto training? Legendary Sannin inquired, giggling at the boy's unexpected burst of energy. In his typical bluster, Naruto responded. Of course I like training more than meeting people, but if there are others like me, I'd still like to meet them. Then meet this person you will, Legendary Sannin said. We'll be meeting the Seven Tails at some point during our stay there. Naruto simply nodded in response to Legendary Sannin's statement because he was more interested in figuring out who this specific person was, whether they suffered the same things as Gaara, Yugito, and himself, whether they lived in poverty, or whether they were content with their current situation. He had a lot of questions about this person that he was still unable to fully answer, which naturally made Legendary Sannin laugh a lot as he watched his student silently reflect. He then looked forward as he silently led his charge towards Waterfall. The following. I'll fetch you this Electro-Sennin. After arriving from Lightning Country after a 4-day journey, Legendary Sannin immediately set out to find a suitable training location and assign Naruto the task at hand. Perform the water walking exercise in a raging river, but being able to stand perfectly still. Struggling against the raging currents of the river, he struggled to maintain control of his chakra while trying to stay balanced atop the water, let alone standing completely still like Legendary Sannin was currently doing, while laughing at the expense of his student. The two of them continued to train while the roaring waters roared around them. Over the roar of the river, Legendary Sannin responded. You'll thank me for this later. laughing heartily as he watched Naruto struggle to balance while fighting against the current. Although he was much better than when he first left with him, to the point where he could easily destroy his old ninja self, Naruto still had a lot to learn before he could reach his full potential, but he was getting there. It would only be a matter of time before he learned everything he could, and either took on a new master or began to self-teach techniques and abilities, but for now, he would continue to learn and grow. He had no idea how far he would grow, but he knew deep down that Naruto would eventually surpass him and the Yondaime. Like hell, I will! Returning the shout, Naruto addressed legendary Sannin. Isn't it better to focus on staying afloat rather than conversing with me? I mean, it is a long way down from here. The legendary Sannin mocked, pointing to his left where the river abruptly stopped. What do you suppose I'm attempting to accomplish? In response, Naruto slipped and almost fell into the lake before regaining his equilibrium, or at least the appearance of it. Legendary Sannin muttered to himself. Maybe I should take him to the land of whirlpools afterwards. As a broad smile began to appear on his face as he tried to picture Naruto straining to keep his hold on the water while attempting to avoid being drawn into the heart of that. Naruto noted, I don't like that smirk on your face, Ero Sennin. After attaining a precarious equilibrium while resisting the flow. Legendary Sannin remarked coolly, I never said you have to. Before turning to face the forest behind him. You don't have to keep hiding, you know, we won't bite, he said. Well, his student muttered, then turned to face legendary Sannin. A moment later, Naruto saw a tanned girl emerge from the bushes. She appeared to be no older than him, wearing a white tank top with a fishnet undershirt that exposed her midriff and white pants that ended halfway down her calf, with kunai pouches strapped on each leg. Her light green hair stopped at the base of her neck, held to the side by a hair clip, allowing her ruby eyes to be seen clearly in the daytime sun. The Hittite of the hidden village of Waterfall was wrapped around her right bicep. So why have you come here? As he returned to dry land, the legendary Sannin inquired, Are you interested in our training? Not particularly, legendary Sannin-sama, the girl said, bowing courteously to the toad hermit. I decided to investigate after hearing your student making a noise while I was passing by, and it's evident that you're teaching him how to water walk against the strong river currents, she said. Legendary Sannin smiled and stated, Just a brush up on his chakra control, even though Naruto was still struggling and looking daggers into the back of his head. The girl chose to remain silent and just sit on her knees, quietly watching Naruto as he resumed his training. He tried to keep his composure and balance, but he couldn't help but notice how ridiculously adorable she looked. Her small body and chest only made her look even cuter, and he couldn't help but wonder how that only made her look even cuter. On top of her adorable appearance, she exuded confidence, as if she was content with who she was, no matter what was wrong with her. He wondered what kind of person she was to exude such confidence. If anything, one might assume that she was royalty, or had ties to such an environment that it just rubbed off on her, or was trained to be that way in front of such people. Are you interested in me? The girl inquired, almost disrupting Naruto's focus. Tell me, why is the daimyo's daughter all the way out here? Legendary Sannin sighed and laughed at his student's current situation as he watched him jump off the river and land in front of him and the girl. Get off that river before you kill yourself, he said. Naruto yelled as the two gazed at the Sannin, one shocked that she had been discovered without any of her royal accoutrements, and the other shocked that she was a daimyo's daughter and a ninja. How were you aware? The girl asked, looking at legendary Sannin with skepticism and incredulity. Legendary Sannin responded, laughing with laughter. It wasn't too hard to figure it out because I've just seen pictures of you. You see and hear things as you travel, she replied. I see, and sighed because she hadn't thought of perhaps concealing her physical characteristics. So, once more, unless you're training or something, what brings you out here? In response, the girl said, Just a private training session away from home, legendary Sanin-san. Who is she, Ano-sa? Naruto inquired, grabbing both individuals' attention. Of course, said legendary Sanin, discovering that he had been excluding Naruto from the conversation. Naruto meets Suzuhara Miyuki, Chunin of Hidden Village of Waterfall, daughter of the local daimyo, and of course, Jinchuriki of Shichibi, he said. Both Jinchuriki cried out, one surprised to find someone who was similar to him and the other perplexed as to how legendary Sanin could have known that specific fact. How did you dash? Legendary Sanin rightly said. One does not travel, and not end up developing connections and information networks. Before introducing himself. Miyuki, this is Uzumaki Naruto, genin of Kanehagaku no Sato, and Jinchuriki of Kyubi no Yoko, he said. Miyuki muttered, a Jinchuriki, and turned to face Naruto in shock and incredulity. So, there are others like me. Naruto noticed right away that Miyuki's eyes were very different from the other Jinchuriki he had previously met. While his, Yugito's, and Gaara's eyes were filled with sadness and pain, Miyuki's eyes looked nothing like theirs. If anything, she had grown up happy and loved, free from the horrors and pains that other villages inflicted upon their own Jinchuriki. This made him wonder what kind of parent the daimyo was and what the villagers were like if they accepted her for who she was without question. A twinge of jealousy went through him as he realized how fortunate she must be to have none of that pain in her eyes. Not so fortunate like you though, Miyuki Harem, the legendary Sanin sorrowfully said, clapping his hand on his back. You were lucky to have a father who understood the meaning of your sacrifice, and protected you from the prejudice of human nature. You were among ninjas who could truly understand the meaning of you carrying that demon within you and respected you for it. The Jinchuriki from other villages such as this young man, their villages scorned and despised those who protected their villages by being alive every day. The life of most Jinchuriki is not a bright one, it's a sad life usually. Miyuki responded. But I was fortunate, nodding in agreement. She approached Naruto and bent slightly in front of him, saying, While I cannot fathom the pain you must have lived, I offer my condolences. Naruto murmured, I don't need your pity, as he watched Miyuki look back at him sadly after offending him. I'd rather have your friendship, he said. What? Naruto reiterated. I'd like to be buddies, extending his hand. After all, we Jinchuriki must stick together, don't we? Naruto-san. Miyuki exhaled in surprise, then she took his hand in hers and smiled softly. I accept your gesture of friendship, she said. Naturally, this is when Naruto's stomach started to churn, much to his shame. I guess, that training took a lot out of me, he said sheepishly, stroking the back of his head. It seems so, Miyuki said, covering her mouth in an unsuccessful attempt to control her laughter, which Naruto thought was cute. Maybe I could give you lunch? Come on, let's get changed, legendary Sanin replied, accepting the invitation. We'd be delighted. The following. Legendary Sanin yelled. Naruto, slow down before you choke, as he observed Naruto shoving down plate after dish. Having been brought to Miyuki's private cabin, she had told them to sit down at the small dining table and started to cook a large meal for everyone. That in itself was a surprise to Naruto considering how it was usually unheard of for someone of such stature to be cooking their own meals. However, it seemed that Miyuki personally enjoyed cooking and had been tutored by the family cook, who had taught her everything she knew about cooking. When she had finally finished, it turned that she had put together a gargantuan meal for everyone, to legendary Sanin's extreme surprise and Naruto's delight. Unfortunately, the moment Naruto had taken his first bite of Miyuki's cooking, he rapidly began to devour whatever Miyuki had laid down in front of him, at an astronomical rate, of course. It didn't help that Miyuki had intentionally gave Naruto a substantially large portion considering how large her portion was as well. Glancing down at his portion, Legendary Sanin was glad that they had most of the food since he was sure he could not out-eat either of them. Of course, it had to hand it off to Miyuki for making an accurate guess of how much he was capable of eating. She was obviously accustomed to the fact that, given the amount of nutrients required, she had to cook a lot to get the amount she needed to keep her body functioning properly. But at least she wasn't like the pig of an apprentice he had. Despite having to eat a sizable portion, she ate her food calmly and elegantly, with the pride and fluidity befitting a ninja princess of her size. He could only sigh heavily as Naruto just kept eating, and of course Miyuki just laughed at her antics between bites. "What will I do with you?" The legendary Sanin let out a sigh before returning his focus to his meal. On the other hand, Naruto was in heaven. He always knew that food prepared by a woman's hands was typically far superior to that prepared by a male master chef. This particular dish was even more amazing than he had initially thought. He didn't know how to describe it. The words to even describe what he was eating were beyond his current vocabulary. But he didn't care. All he wanted to do was keep eating this, and if he was lucky, keep eating this for the rest of his life. Naturally, then a specific thought came to him. "Are you able to prepare ramen?" "What was that for?" he blurted out, taking a hard smack to the back of his skull right away. "Do you have anything else on your mind but ramen?" As the two continued to argue over ramen, Legendary Sanin yelled, albeit in a humorous way. Throughout this, Miyuki just sat and kept eating while watching the spectacle of a student and master arguing with each other. Naturally, Miyuki felt that Naruto and Legendary Sanin were much closer than that, but she also subtly thought that what she was witnessing was more like an uncle and his nephew arguing over the smallest of things. This naturally made her smile as she watched them continue to joke around. Since all she had was her father, she didn't often get to witness such family spectacles. She groaned softly. "I envy them." But Naruto seemed to hear, interrupted his argument, and asked her to repeat herself. "Eh? Oh, I'm envious of you too." "What's to be envious of?" "He's nothing but a perverted sage who writes that Ika Ika series," Naruto said, glancing at her with interest and thumbing in Legendary Sanin's direction. Miyuki replied, blushing. "Oh my!" Legendary Sanin boldly said, "I see you've heard of my books," sporting his trademark lustful smile. The princess said in a low voice, "I've read one of your books." "Eh?" Naruto exclaimed, looking at Miyuki in disbelief as she performed an excellent impression of a tomato. "You read those books?" "Well, it is good literature, if one can look past the adult material." "Ah, I see," Naruto answered, unsure of how to react. "Anyways," Legendary Sanin interrupted, refocusing the discussion before Naruto could continue to disparage his book verbally. "What specifically do you feel envious of, Miyuki Harem?" "Well," Miyuki explained, "you seem to have an uncle-nephew relationship." Legendary Sanin couldn't help but laugh when he said, "I suppose you could say that." He remarked on how accurate Miyuki was, aside from the fact that he was Naruto's godfather, even though he hadn't mentioned it to the boy yet. He said that he would bring it up later, when he was finally ready for everything. Naruto sneered. "So we act like uncle-nephew?" asking why anyone would be jealous. Miyuki answered, "Because I don't have any family besides my father," with that well-known twinge of sadness. She felt as though she had been denied a normal life, but she had been denied a full family, which included a mother, cousins, aunts, uncles, and relatives from all over the family. "Oh," Naruto remarked, regretting his response and expressing sympathy for her. "But at least you have your dad. I don't even know my mom and dad." "Oh," Miyuki said. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you." Naruto replied, "Nah, it's alright," and waved it away. "Still, I envy you," she said while chewing on her meal. "You at least have that relationship with Legendary Sanin-san. Everyone else, still treats me as the daimyo's daughter. I'm mostly seen for what I stand for, not who I am. What would that be, then? Legendary Sanin inquired, glancing at her thoughtfully, as Nuda listened to Miyuki in silence. A 16-year-old girl who just wants to become the best ninja she can be, and start a ninja clan, she said with conviction. I want someone who can love me, for me, not what marrying me would gain. I want to be recognized for my hard work. I want to become Master Ninja because I've earned the right to be a Master Ninja. I love my father dearly, but the shadow he casts, it bothers me a lot. It's quite natural, said the legendary Sanin. It's not uncommon for this to happen. It's everywhere. Jinchuriki especially. The demons they cage often cast such a large shadow that they are often considered to be the demon incarnate, instead of the jailer of the demon. Naruto is no exception. Many wanted to kill him for what they thought he was. What? With her eyes widening in dread at the idea, she cried out. What humans don't understand, they try to destroy, he said. Such is the ways of human nature. It is a horrible thing at times. That's horrible, Legendary Sanin said. A lot of humans are like that. Got up from the table, thanked everyone for the lunch, and left. After Legendary Sanin, Naruto said, Where are you, Ero Senin? I'll be back in a couple of hours, Legendary Sanin said. Getting some work done. Naruto knew he couldn't argue back when Legendary Sanin said he had work to do, even though he suspected research was involved. Whenever he mentioned work, it meant he had something to take care of that he didn't want Naruto to be involved in, usually for his safety. He had asked once and had regrettably incurred Legendary Sanin's wrath, and he didn't want to go through that again. Yeah, just don't kill yourself, Naruto complained as he leaned back in his chair. Who do you suppose I am, hey? Legendary Sanin laughed and shut the door. Unfortunately, unless he was following, he wouldn't be able to interrupt him until he was well into his research already. Damn that Ero Senin, Naruto complained, digging into some more food in an attempt to distract himself from the perverted sage, especially knowing that he would likely find some sort of hot spring, stream, or creek and observe women after his work was done. To answer your earlier question, I know how to make ramen, explained Miyuki, wiping her lips clean after consuming her last bite of food. Next time, could you make some? With excitement, Naruto inquired. If you'd like, she said with a humorous grin. As he finished his dinner, Naruto couldn't help but giggle. Oh, that was good, he said, stroking his stomach, which made Miyuki laugh a little, which he also found enjoyable. Naruto-kun, Miyuki exclaimed abruptly as she rose from her seat. Would you want to accompany me on a walk? The following. Well, where are we going? As they strolled through the woodland in silence, Naruto inquired. She replied, Nowhere in particular, with her eyes mostly fixed on herself. Despite not being able to read minds, Naruto couldn't help but stare at her with curiosity, wondering what kind of creature was hiding deep inside of her. May I ask you a private question, Naruto-kun? She inquired abruptly, taking Naruto by surprise. Sure. They stopped, and Miyuki turned to face him directly. Has anyone ever mentioned that you look a lot like Yondaime Headmaster?